How does Virginia Tech bounce back after a tough week one matchup against South Carolina? This is something we're going to discuss because they have another big matchup against the Vanderbilt Commodores. We'll look at what Virginia Tech needs to do to get better and also look at their opponent to see what we should expect from them and how Virginia Tech can play well against the Commodores this week. Last week, it was tough. You faced a South Carolina team that has a couple of freaks on their team, including Lenora Sellers, and you lost 24-11. Now, a lot of people are just assuming, okay, well, that's just more of the same for Virginia Tech. And you could very well be right about that. You saw some of the similar things from last year. Kyron Drones made some mistakes that were similar to what we saw last year as well. But there are also things that they did well that they didn't do last year. I think that the defensive line play was better than what we saw in 2024. I think that the explosive plays that they were able to make, even though they were inconsistent, were better than what we saw in 2024. Now, that being said, that's not enough to win a football game. But I do think some of the things that Virginia Tech did were fixable. I think that if Kyron Drones takes a half second to think about what he's doing, you look at the first interception he threw. Virginia Tech's driving. And to me, that's a much different game if they score a touchdown there versus Drones throws an interception. And obviously you can't go back. You can't change that outcome. But Kyron Drones has the ability to make smarter decisions. He has the ability to, he can throw the ball a pretty long ways. And we saw his wide receivers make some big plays for him. I think Aiden Green is set up for a special season. I think he made some big catches when they needed him to. And he also had another one that he couldn't come up with, but it was a tight throw, tight coverage, and just barely dropped it, right? So I think that he is going to have a fun year. Donovan Green only had 3 catches, but he took those catches for 94 yards. There is talent to be utilized if you're Virginia Tech. The rushing attack was okay. You want to see that improve as well. But I think the pieces are there. I think that if you are a Virginia Tech fan, you have to think that there is reason for optimism. One game is not a reason to obviously overreact, but it's not a reason to overact either way, right? We don't want to say, yeah, they're going to be great, but we're also not going to say, yeah, they're going to be terrible, because anybody that plays Lenora Sellers, we saw it last year, is going to look bad at some point. Anybody that tries to guard Nick Harbor, guy has track speed. Like, we saw that. Virginia Tech learned that the hard way. And when Nick Harbor scored his touchdown, the first legitimate one, the one I should say that was not reviewed and not overturned, I think that you're looking at a cornerback who doesn't jam him, doesn't get his hands on him at the line of scrimmage, and tries to run step for step with a guy who you're not going to catch. That's fixable. Kyron Drones interception, that's fixable. Those are things that you can change, and that changes the outcome. Now, you still have to do something about it, but it wasn't like Lenora Sellers, Nick Harbor, Dylan Stewart did whatever they wanted. Did they have their moments? Sure. But I think people are forgetting that Dylan Stewart was largely ineffective for most of the first half and well into the third quarter before we saw him have a big impact. Now, granted, he did have an impact in a different way where he's influencing what Virginia Tech tried to do offensively, but also that's part of it. Philip Montgomery's job is to figure out, how do I take away their best player? How do I take away players that are going to hurt us the most? And how do we dare other people to beat us? One of the things they did really well, they sat back and they said, Lenora Sellers, you're going to have to go through progressions. You're going to have to figure out who the open guy is going to be. You're not just going to get to read one player and chuck it deep or make a throw to this guy over here. It's just not going to happen. I really like the staffing changes that Brent Pry made, and I think that that's really exciting if you're a Virginia Tech fan. Now, this week, it's going to be a different test. Vanderbilt is a very different team than South Carolina, but there are a lot of similarities. Diego Pavia is going to be one of the better quarterbacks that they face all year. He's tough as nails. He's a competitor, and he will find ways to exploit any team that he's playing against. He will find weaknesses in a defense, and you have to bring your best game. One of the ways you can do that is by being physical. I think that Virginia Tech's defensive line has the ability to get to him and take away some of the things he does best. Take away his throwing lanes, take away his rushing ability, and get some hits on him. And this is a Vanderbilt team that surprised people last year. So a lot of people are just going to pick this. I should say pick Vanderbilt as the winner. But that's a perfect spot if you are a Virginia Tech fan. And right now, surprisingly enough, Virginia Tech is favored by 1 in a lot of places, 1.5 even at some. That tells you that the books obviously think that just because you lost to South Carolina, and you lost to South Carolina by 13, Vanderbilt, to a lot of people, is a worse team than South Carolina. Now, it's not the Vanderbilt of old. It's not your traditional Vanderbilt team. But this is a home game for Virginia Tech. It's a home game against a team that is definitely beatable. And again, it all comes back to those self-inflicted wounds. Are you able to fix some of those things? Your quarterback has to be more accurate. Your defense has to take away a guy in Eli Stowers that's going to be a difficult player to guard. Vanderbilt has some underrated players on the offensive side of the ball. They also have some underrated talent on defense. This is a defense that a lot of people don't really know, but it's going to give Virginia Tech trouble. And that's where Kyron Drones comes in. That's where he has to be consistent. He has to be better than he was last week. And I think he can. I think we saw signs that he can make those decisions. He can make some big time throws, and his wide receivers can make some big time catches. That's a combination I like. And also the atmosphere in Lane Stadium. It's been so long since we've seen Lane Stadium be this electric atmosphere that it deserves to be. And it's a big part of it is because your team struggled so much. And granted, they're 0-1, but I imagine that the stadium at the beginning of the game is still going to be electric. Enter Sandman is going to get the crowd going crazy. And a good game and a game against an SEC team is going to keep them interested. It's just up to the team to fix those mistakes, to be better than they were last week. Vanderbilt is not going to make it easy. This is, like I said, a much better Vanderbilt team than in years past. But that's almost better. Virginia Tech doesn't have a chance to feel sorry for themselves. They don't have a chance to pout or anything like that. They're right back to the drawing board. They're right back to figuring out, how do we get better? How do we fix our mistakes? And now you do it against another SEC opponent who's not as good as South Carolina. To a lot of people, we'll see if that remains true at the end of the year. But that's a great way to get your team refocused and turn their attention to a team that is very difficult to beat. You get to do it at home. The atmosphere is going to be great. And if they're able to fix some of those things, this is going to be a very exciting game, a game that not a lot of people are talking about, but one that they might be when it's all said and done.